Let's see what the news has in store for us this week. So we'll ask Copilot, as usual, show me the top UK news stories over the past 7 days. Exclude mainstream media in favour of alternative sources. So the key headlines, are you ready for it? I'm expecting the top headline to be Iran. And it's not. That surprises me. Arrest linked to alleged spying for China. Now, this is News Now. ITV reported that the husband of a Labour MP was amongst 3 men arrested on suspicion of spying for China. This continues a growing pattern of UK-China political tension and security concerns. I did see something about this, but only, I think it was today and yesterday, there have been things put up on social media about this. So it's definitely very recent. Spying for China, not a great thing. But from a health and wellbeing point of view, it's not something I would dive into. For the health and well-being of our country, it's possibly not so great. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. And it doesn't surprise me that a Labour MP is involved. Okay. Student visas halted for several countries amid rising asylum claims. So this is again News Now. The UK paused student visas for applicants from Afghanistan, Cameroon, Myanmar, and Sudan, citing surging asylum claims. This has major implications for universities and migration policy. So I'm assuming that from those countries, students are coming over and are choosing to stay in our country. There's a lot of controversy about asylum seekers at the moment. Restore Britain are sending out messages on social media about what they will be doing about asylum claims. They're saying that they're going to cut off asylum claims. People will not be able to come into this country. Implications for universities, well, their figures will obviously drop. It will be them. But again, not really something from a health and wellbeing point of view. Air defense warship HMS Dragon deployed to deter Iranian airspace activity. So we do have Iran on our list, but it's number 3. So Copilot obviously didn't deem the war that important. So the UK sent HMS Dragon to enforce a no-go zone for Iranian aircraft, reflecting heightened Middle East tensions and the UK's military commitments. Well, there's been a lot of posting about Starmer not allowing the US to utilize their bases on our soil. And that has pulled a lot of people out of where they would normally sit in a geopolitical stance. So Declassified UK wrote this article, and it's dated the 20th of February. So this is when Starmer said that he would not allow the US to utilize the UK as part of their effort against Iran. How Britain could be involved in a US attack on Iran. Trump wants Britain's help with another illegal war in the Middle East, which could have far-reaching consequences. Trump has signalled that British military bases may be crucial to an attack on Iran without offering a legal justification for bombing that country. Trump posted on Wednesday, should Iran decide not to make a deal, it may be necessary for the United States to use Diego Garcia and the airfield located in Fairford in order to eradicate a potential attack by a highly unstable and dangerous regime. RAF Fairford is in Gloucestershire. It has a 10,000-foot runway and is the US Air Force's only European airfield for heavy bombers. So it can host their B-52 bombers. And those B-52s flew daily missions from the base to bomb Iraq during the 2003 invasion. Diego Garcia is part of the Chagos Islands, an archipelago in the Indian Ocean, which has a runway long enough for US B-2 stealth bombers that could bomb deep inside Iran. Britain illegally occupies the Chagos Islands and has only just agreed to return them to Mauritius, while retaining a 99-year lease on Diego Garcia for US-UK military purposes. So they're returning the islands, but they're keeping the base, the Diego Garcia base. Trump now opposes the proposed handover, despite it being necessary to comply with a ruling from the International Court of Justice, and denounced it as wokeism. So the Times reported his opposition is based on Britain's apparent refusal to let him use Diego Garcia to stage attacks on Iran, which could happen over the coming days. And as we know, it has happened. Trump did not use Diego Garcia or Fairford last June when he bombed Iran in Operation Midnight Hammer, opting instead to send heavy bombers all the way over the Atlantic from US soil. Britain's Ministry of Defence declined to comment on Thursday when asked by Declassified if Trump had permission to use Diego Garcia or Fairford to bomb Iran this time. The MOD spokesperson said, "As routine, we do not comment on the operational activity of other nations, including third-party use of UK bases. The US is the UK's principal defence and security partner. The depth of our defence relationship with the US remains an essential part of our security." The ministry also refused to comment on whether such an attack on Iran would be lawful. Trump is not publicly making any legal case for his potential attack on a sovereign state, other than to suggest Iran might try to attack the US in future. For a strike to be conducted in self-defense, the attack must be imminent. This threshold was highlighted during the debate on invading Iraq in 2003, when Keir Starmer himself wrote, "The mere fact that Iraq has a capacity to attack at some unspecified time in the future is not enough." Now that comes from Starmer, so hold that in your mind when it comes to what the US has done over the weekend and since to Iran. So I'll say that again. The mere fact that Iraq, and you can substitute the word Iran in there, has a capacity to attack at some unspecified time in the future is not enough. Trump's bombardment of Iran in 2025 also failed to reach that threshold, according to Sir Richard Dalton, the UK's former ambassador to Tehran. He told Declassified, "By every standard, this was not a legal preemptive attack." Any British participation in an attack on Iran could result in serious consequences for UK troops abroad, as well as triggering an economic or refugee crisis. Iranian officials have vowed an unprecedented response against all who support the aggressor. If Trump attacks, signalling they will go much further than previous choreographed responses. Britain has hundreds of military personnel in the Gulf that are well within range of Iran's missile arsenal, especially the naval facility HMS Jafar in Bahrain, spy stations in Oman, and air bases in Qatar and the UAE. Although protected by air defences, including Typhoon fighter jets, these could potentially be overwhelmed if Iran fires a high volume of short-range missiles at the bases. UK military and intelligence personnel stationed at bases further from Iran could be within range, including staff in Jordan and even on Cyprus. And as we know, they were within range because over the weekend, Iran bombed the UK airbase in Cyprus. The same UK airbase that has been doing covert operations from Cyprus over Gaza to feed information to Israel. And Iran's stance, having been attacked over the weekend, is that they support and they are fighting for the freedom of the Palestinians. And anybody who has been involved in attacking Iran are now targets. So that is why our base, the UK base in Cyprus, was attacked. So British naval personnel may also be dotted throughout the US carrier battle groups being deployed to the region, as several were believed to be ahead of Trump's attack on Venezuela. They too could be vulnerable to Iranian counterattacks. Tehran could also mine the narrow Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil supplies flow each day, causing an energy price shock. Well, this was all preempted by declassified UK because the Strait of Hormuz has been closed by Iran. The only tankers that are allowed to go through, as far as I'm aware, are the Chinese tankers, so that they can get their liquid natural gas, LNG. In any retaliatory strike, Iran is likely to target Israel, whose Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has advocated for a US-led war against Tehran for decades. In October 24, RAF Typhoons and Voyager refueling aircraft played a role in intercepting missiles which were fired by Iran at Israel. Several of Britain's most advanced fighter jets, the F-35, were moved to Cyprus a fortnight ago to boost air defences in the eastern Mediterranean. So declassified they already preempted everything that was going and has happened over the weekend. So it was a warning, but that was written, like I say, on the 22nd of February. Oh, 20th of February. X from Martin Shaw. British complicity. Some of America's most advanced aircraft and aerial refueling tankers have transited through RAF Mildenhall and RAF Lakenheath on their way to the Middle East, continuing a 6-week trend that has been Trump's so-called massive armada amass in the region. And this was on February the 28th. So February the 28th was Saturday. That was the day that Israel and the US struck Iran. And according to Martin Shaw, this has been going on for 6 weeks prior. Declassified again. As the US and Israel illegally bomb Iran, American warplanes have been transiting through UK military bases en route to the Middle East. So campaigners condemn Starmer's secrecy over the US attack on Iran. American warplanes are transiting through UK military bases en route to the Middle East. Why is Britain allowing it? And this was the day of the strike, the first strike. Anti-war campaigners have accused the British government of playing down its support for an illegal US attack on Iran, as American warplanes continue to transit through UK military bases this week on the way to the Middle East, even though Starmer said that they weren't allowing the US to utilise our bases. The opaque decision-making, they say, has left much of the British public in the dark about the role the UK is playing and therefore unable to challenge what is happening. Dozens of US warplanes have been able to transit through sites in Suffolk, with fighter jets going via Lakenheath, while intelligence and refuelling planes left from nearby Mildenhall. Where is the government's announcement on this? Asked Sophie Bolt, General Secretary for the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. The total secrecy and denial, refusing to confirm or deny, which is their standard response to anything going on ostensibly at a US military base, means that you can't hold them to account. So this is, again, Declassified UK, pointing out that our politicians are, again, lying to us. Starmer saying, no, we're not involved. This is something that goes against international law. They struck Iran unprovoked. It's an illegal strike. And Iran is perfectly within its rights to defend itself as a sovereign nation. And that's what they've done. But all of the guffawing from our politicians saying, oh, we're not involved, we're not involved. Yes, they have been. It has been uncovered that they are involved. Let's get back to the news. UK government charters repatriation flight from Oman. A repatriation flight was arranged for UK nationals stranded in Oman, highlighting ongoing geopolitical instability affecting travel. We know that in a lot of the Middle East countries, the airports have been targeted. You're very hard pushed if you're in those countries to be able to get out of those countries. It's a terrible situation, but it's an ongoing thing. Police Federation boss arrested for alleged fraud. A senior Police Federation figure was arrested on suspicion of fraud, raising questions about internal governance and accountability within policing bodies. Our politicians lie to us, and our police are involved in illegal activities. Investigative questions raised about US military bases in Britain. We've kind of just covered this a little. Declassified UK published 11 pressing questions about the transparency and oversight of US bases operating on UK soil, reflecting long-standing concerns about sovereignty and military secrecy. I do understand that a level of secrecy does need to be in place, because if you tell everyone, then that information can be leaked. However, when we're in the situation we're in at the moment, this kind of information needs to be brought to light. Public trust in government hits record low. No shit, Shirley. Reports suggest trust in UK governance has fallen to historic lows, with calls for electoral reform gaining momentum, while rumour mill news is highly alternative and sometimes speculative. The theme aligns with broader public sentiment. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We have absolutely no trust in our government at all. It needs to be torn down. It needs to be pulled apart. We need to start again. And I posted on X just the other day, about pulling our government completely apart and starting fresh, and saying that only people who have worked, like physically done paid work in our country, full-time paid work in our country, should even be considered for being voted to be a politician. Somebody who has held a job, somebody who knows how difficult life can be. So not straight out of university, straight into politics, no. Straight out of university into a job, hold a job for a period of time, and then if you want to go into politics, that will be a measure of whether you're entitled to go into politics, because you'll have an understanding of the working man. And the other point I made was lies. Any politician that is found to have lied to his constituents or to any citizens in the UK should be stripped of office and never allowed to hold a position of power in this country again. Ever. That would start to build public trust in our government. Reform UK figure accused of politicising council staff. Zia Youssef of Reform UK Zia Youssef of Reform UK was accused of using propaganda to influence council employees, adding to scrutiny of the party's internal practices. There have been quite a few issues surrounding reform. Not anything that I've taken much of a notice of, mainly because I have no interest in any politicians at all anymore. They're all corrupt. They all bow down to the overlords, and anything they say they're going to do is always going to change when they get in power, because that's how it is, that's how it works, that's how it goes. So whenever I see anything about reform, it just makes me laugh that they think they're an alternative to what's already there, because there are no alternatives to what's already there. So that was Copilot. Now we'll ask Claude. Same question. You can see Claude actually goes through quite a lot of different resources, whereas Copilot has a tendency to stick to just a few. So here's a roundup of the top UK news stories from the past 7 days. Green Party wins Gorton and Denton by-election, a seismic political movement. Hannah Spencer of the Green Party won the Gorton and Denton by-election on 26th of February with 40.7% of the vote and a majority of 4,402, becoming the Green Party's 5th MP and their first in the north of England. Reform UK placed second with 10,578 votes. Labour finished third on 9,364. And the Conservatives saw their worst ever by-election result. Labour had won more than half of the vote in the seat at the 2024 general election, making this the first time the party has come third in a by-election it was defending since Mitcham and Morden in 1982. Well, from the current state of the Labour Party, that doesn't surprise me at all. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, had applied to be the Labour candidate but was blocked by the party's National Executive Committee, a decision commentators described as a possible move to prevent him mounting a leadership challenge to PM Keir Starmer. Post-result, Reform UK and the Conservatives formally raised a complaint with the Electoral Commission over alleged family voting, with Reform also reporting the matter to the police. Reform Chair David Ball told the BBC that the problem was probably not significant enough to have affected the result, so they're just bitching. Basically, they're throwing their dummy out of their pram because they lost. Spring statement, slower growth, no new policies. Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered the spring statement on the 3rd of March. The OBR now forecasts growth of 1.1% in 2026, down from a November forecast of 1.4%. Though forecasts for 2027 and 28 were slightly upgraded to 1.6. Borrowing is set to reduce by nearly £18 billion compared to the autumn, and unemployment is expected to peak this year, then fall in every subsequent year for the forecast period, ending at 4.1%, lower than at the start of this parliament. So that's their prediction as to whether it comes true or not. The Institute for Government noted that Reeves was right to make it a low-key affair, but warned that the OBR's forecasts are already potentially outdated given the unfolding conflict in the Middle East and its impacts on energy prices. UK wholesale gas prices doubled in the 2 days before the statement, the largest price hike since records began, a development not reflected in the OBR's published figures. We knew that once they bombed Iran, it would cause chaos when it came to our energy prices. And it is. UK's first geothermal power plant goes live in Cornwall. The United Downs geothermal plant near Redruth, Cornwall, switched on 26th of February. The UK's first ever geothermal power plant developed by Geothermal Engineering Limited. The plant will power around 10,000 homes. GEL also announced the start of commercial-scale lithium carbonate production at the site, with an initial capacity of 100 tonnes per annum, with plans to scale to more than 18,000 tonnes over the next decade, enough for around 65% of the UK's annual EV battery registrations. The plant was nearly 20 years in the making and cost $63 million, partly funded through what is now an unavailable source, the EU's European Development Fund, a consequence of Brexit. Okay, so a geothermal power plant. Can look into that. I'm not sure whether there are any health concerns surrounding a geothermal power plant, but it might be interesting to have a look and see what it's about. Peter Mandelson and the Epstein scandal rocks Labour. During the Gorton and Denton campaign, the resignation of PM Starmer's Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney over advising the appointment of Peter Mandelson as US Ambassador, despite known links to Jeffrey Epstein, added to Labour's difficulties. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar also called for the Prime Minister to stand down over the Mandelson saga. I think he should stand down. I think he should stand down anyway because he's doing an appalling job. Political realignment, Greens polling ahead of Labour. For what commentators are describing as a possible first, the Greens have begun polling ahead of Labour nationally, with observers calling it a seismic shift in British politics. Reform, meanwhile, continues to lead national polls. Analysts suggest the fracturing of the traditional two-party system is accelerating, with Reform and the Greens squeezing Labour and the Conservatives simultaneously. You know my thoughts, doesn't matter who's in power. Power is a relative word. Parliament, Women's Health and Armed Forces Bill. A new Women and Equalities Committee report published on the 4th of March warned that women's health is not being sufficiently prioritised in the government's National Health Service reforms ahead of International Women's Day. Separately, the Select Committee on the Armed Forces Bill began public evidence sessions this week, covering reserve forces, defence housing and the surface justice system. Okay. So not very much from a health and wellbeing point of view for me to dive into. I will have a look at the new power plant though, just to see what that's all about. And finally, we'll ask Grok. Now, Grok is the only one who's put the US-Iran conflict at the top. UK's response to US-Iran conflict and Trump criticism of Starmer. Escalating Middle East tensions dominate, with US strikes on Iran, including submarine actions. UK deploying HMS Dragon to Cyprus delayed, and debates over allowing US use of UK bases. Trump publicly criticised PM Keir Starmer as no Winston Churchill and said the UK-US relationship is not what it was. Alternative commentary, GB News and Expatriates, frames this as Starmer's weakness, calls for stronger action and links to energy bill rises, £160 plus potential hikes and economic fallout. Well, I've already shown you that Declassified have hinted at the fact that they have been using our bases for 6 weeks prior to this. So to the build-up of the war, they had been using our bases. So we are complicit in this. We have had a hand in this. Arrests on suspicion of spying for China. 3 men arrested, including the husband of Labour MP Joanne Reid, David Taylor. Counter-terror police involved, tied to foreign interference in UK democracy. This sparked discussions on security, parliamentary vulnerabilities and government handling. I love the fact that Grok has used the word democracy. Considering our government have become a dictatorship, it's very interesting that Grok uses the word democracy. Immigration and border concerns. Ongoing debates on migrant arrivals via Northern Ireland routes. Wildlife incidents. Migrants allegedly butchering swans and ducks in the UK and Ireland. And prioritisation of migrants over the homeless Brits. A homeless person freezing outside a migrant hotel in Derby. Alternative X voices highlight trafficking claims, cultural clashes and calls for stricter border deportations. Like I said, if Restore Britain have their way, that won't be an issue. Thereafter sending everybody back. I can't believe that they would be butchering swans and ducks. They obviously are. Domestic political scandals and shifts. By-election losses for Labour, embarrassing defeats to Greens or Independents in strongholds. We read about that. Arrest scandals involving figures like Peter Mandelson linked to Epstein probes. Broader sentiment on X from Patriots, rising support for reform, Advance UK, great replacement awareness and frustration with multiculturalism, rape gang discussions. Well, Rupert Lowe, the chap that has started the Restore Britain Party, has been conducting his independent inquiries into the rape gangs. And that has stirred up general feeling because he's concentrating on the Pakistani, I think, the Pakistani involvement in the rape gangs. So he's definitely looking at an angle from the multicultural kind of position. So other notable mentions: visa restrictions on students from certain nations. We've covered that. Social issues like child abuse image cases with lenient sentencing, grooming by police trainee and calls for independence in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland amid UK chaos. We only talked about Northern Ireland and giving it back last week. Economic societal gripes, energy costs, obviously, farming protests and perceived two-tier policing, justice. So these reflect a tense period with foreign policy fallout, security fears and domestic discontent, often amplified in alternative spaces as evidence of establishment failures. For visuals or key elements like HMS Dragon or related events, and then it gives me all the sources. So very little when it comes to a health and well-being point of view, very large amounts of political tension. And at the time when we are sending our troops over to stop the drones that are coming from Iran from actually landing in places where we have bases, that is us getting involved in the conflict. Starmer tries to put it as a defense. However, we could argue, and I'm sure anybody could argue, that having allowed the US 6 weeks worth of gathering resources and utilizing our bases to do it, then that is not in defense. It's not. You can't sit and say that's defending the citizens of the UK. No, that's aiding and abetting the illegal US-Israeli war on Iran. But that's it for the news for the last 7 days.